Hello, my name is Ruard Ganzevoort. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Religion and Theology at Vrije Universiteit, Amsterdam. And I'm here today to talk with B. Scherer. B is our new professor of Buddhist studies, and we're very happy to have him on board. Be welcome to this strange interreligious faculty that you're now a part of.
Thank you.
You're holding the chair of Buddhist studies, and one of my first questions would be to you: how do you explain the growing interest in Western countries? You've lived in Germany, in the UK, and in the Netherlands. How do you explain the growing interest in Buddhism in the West?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we would need to unpack that, obviously, a little bit historically. But what you could say is the most interesting thing is here to think about modernity and the project of modernity that we have in the global North, especially since the 19th century, and how certain ideas in the project of modernity seems to chime in very, very well with the reception of Buddhism, not necessarily with all Buddhist traditions as they are, but with the reception of Buddhism in the global North. So we have here constitutive discourses around Western theism, mainly Protestant Christianity, scientific rationalism, and romanticism and transcendentalism and its successors. And these are actually three constituent columns in what we could call modern Buddhism or modernist Buddhism, because we see that Buddhism has been received in a way as not a religion as it's been constructed in a negative way, as something that is irrational, that is in contrast to modern developments in science and cognitive sciences, but as some sort of a spiritual technique that is very well compatible with secular humanism, with rationalism, with positivism even. And that is a very important strand today, that people who find a little bit the word religion iffy, they are not so happy to commit to being part of an institution, and also about what they see as irrational elements of religion. But they still think that, oh, in Buddhism, there are practices or techniques that they find interesting, and then they see it as a sort of a individualistic, spiritual approach.
Well, even quite some Christians of all traditions who embrace Buddhist approaches and perspectives as part of their own spirituality.
Absolutely, and that is something that is possible. However, from a Buddhist point of view, obviously, there is an important context to the practices that we say, practices of mindfulness, but also practices in Zen meditation and so on. And these contexts are obviously, they become voided and sometimes even perverted, I would say. You know, if you use mindfulness to make employees better exploitable in late capitalist neoliberalism, and that's happening, then that is an abuse of mindfulness from a Buddhist point of view, obviously.
Yeah, so it's not just a matter of only embracing it, that should always also be approached critically from the values of the tradition itself.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of people who identify as Buddhist some way, don't say they practice a religion, they practice a Buddhist technique or so, but kind of identify with Buddhism, who are very, very surprised when they actually meet Buddhists from different traditions, especially from traditionally Buddhist contexts, and see that Buddhism is practiced in a very, very different way, though.
You already mentioned a very critical approach in your words about neoliberalism and so on. A lot of your work has to do with social justice, and the other part of your work has to do with understanding let's say, the more nerdy style of academic work, understanding the old text and the sources. Yes. How do you combine these two seemingly very different approaches?
Well, what is interesting, I mean, I'm a nerd, I'm a language nerd. I've always loved philology, and I still think that philological work is what I love doing. And very similar to my Christian colleagues who are working with Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic texts and Latin texts, you can do that as the foundation, or you should do that even as the foundation for critical constructive reflection about your own tradition, which is very often textually based, or arguments that are counter social justice are very often found in proof texting, in arguments, in a certain reading of texts that want to preserve the status quo. So I think if we want to counter, have a strategy to counter certain systems of discrimination found in traditional readings of Buddhisms, then we need to know the texts very well. And we need to have hermeneutical strategies to actually counter simplistic and reductionistic proof texting. And that has been done not just in the West, that has been done in, for instance, what is called Japanese critical Buddhism and so on. Right. So it's not something that we all of the sudden in the global North are inventing. That has been done also in Buddhist traditions themselves.
Right. Well, probably everywhere people have always played games with their sources and changed them to accommodate the needs that they had. You also approach this in a very critical way, and one of the terms that you've been using is queering Buddhism or queering Buddhist studies. What do you mean by that?
Well, so here, one of my interests is in gender and sexualities. And in the underlying philosophical systems, we could say critical theory. And we see obviously that the Buddhist traditions intersect with the embodied experience of queer, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex, queer and queerian subjectivities and belongings in very multifaceted ways. And here in critical theory, queer feminist philosophy, queer theory can enrich our Buddhist critical constructive reflective thought and practices by inserting this typical challenging method of deconstruction, which troubles and resists oppressive and harmful socio-religious scripts with regards to sexuality and gender, but also beyond. And you see that in my work that I'm using queer theory a step further to look at disabilities or cripping Buddhism, to look at socio-economic actions and inequalities and so on.
Is that a typical Western approach, or do you see that also in Eastern Buddhism?
Well, first of all, West-East is a difficult dichotomy, but there is a lot queer dharmology, I would say, or constructive critical reflection also in Asian Buddhist reflection. So we have in Taiwan a great Buddhist thinker, Venerable Chao Wei, who has been writing a lot of very, very detailed critics of oppression based on gender and sexuality. We have that in Thailand with very progressive Buddhist thinkers too. So it is not just something that happens in the global North.
Well, that's interesting to see, and also, well, probably one of the challenges. I mean, given that in our society at the moment, diversity is highly contested, and diversity policies are being critiqued from all sides. What would you say is the role of a faculty of religion and theology and of Buddhist studies in that faculty? What could our role be in those kind of diversity debates?
Well, first of all, I would say that the role of academia is to complicate simplistic discourses. And if the discourses somehow overlap or intersect with religion, then this is where we need to look at. One of the criticisms that we find from religious and non-religious people of what they call, not rightly so, but what they call identity politics is that it is too schematic and that it is reducing people to being members of a certain group. And here in fourth wave, third and fourth wave queer feminism, we talk about intersectionality. And I see myself as a queer trans feminist thinker. And intersectionality means that all the intersectional facets of our subjectivities and belongings that can include sex, gender identity, sexuality, disability, neurodiversity, race, ethnicity, cultural tradition, religions, age group, class, socioeconomic status, legal status, and so on. All these facets, they are embodied in concrete experiences, and they constitute the shifting and fluid mosaic of the negotiation of our experiences in society. So what we can do here as a religious studies faculty is to complicate the simplistic statements that you find all the time, saying this group of people is like this, or this group of people is like that, but always pointing to the intersectional concreteness of an experience.
Wonderful. So the role of academia is to make things more complicated. Well, please, thank you so much for being part of our faculty, and for our students and for our alumni. We really hope that they feel more complicated after, not only after hearing you, but after everything they can learn at our faculty. Thanks for this conversation, and thanks for your presence in our faculty.
Thank you very much, Ruard.